The rain hammered against the windows of the penthouse suite like tiny angry fists demanding entry. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, feeling the vibration of each droplet as I gazed at the Manhattan skyline blurred through sheets of water. The thunderstorm matched my mood. Turbulent, dark, exhausted. "Maya, the East Wing still needs attention." Mrs. Peterson's voice cut through my moment of respite, sharp as the lightning outside. "Mr. Salvatore may return any minute." I nodded, swallowing the sigh that threatened to escape. "Yes, ma'am." My reflection stared back at me from the window. Dark circles under eyes that had once been bright, hair pulled back in a severe bun that gave me headaches by day's end. The beige uniform that made me as invisible as the furniture I polished. 24 years old, and I felt twice that age most days. I grabbed my cart of cleaning supplies and wheeled it toward the East Wing, the most intimidating part of the already imposing penthouse. This section belonged exclusively to the owner, the mysterious Mr. Salvatore whom I had never seen, though I'd been cleaning his residence for months. The other maids whispered about him, their voices dropping to reverent hushes. A businessman, they said. Dangerous, they implied. The rules were simple. Clean the East Wing only when he was gone. Touch nothing personal. Leave no trace of yourself behind. I'd adhered to these rules religiously. My mother's medical bills didn't allow for employment risks. The master bedroom was cavernous, decorated in shades of charcoal and midnight blue. The space breathed luxury, hand-knotted rugs from Persia, art pieces worth more than 5 years of my salary, furnishings that whispered old money and quiet power. I moved methodically through my routine, dusting surfaces that never seemed to gather dust, straightening items that were already perfectly aligned. That's when I noticed it. A glint of light on the nightstand, something that hadn't been there during yesterday's cleaning. A watch. But calling it merely a watch would be like calling the ocean water. It was an obscene display of wealth. Diamonds encircled its face, catching light from angles I didn't even know existed. The band appeared to be platinum, the face itself a deep obsidian that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Small, intricate mechanisms were visible beneath the surface, like stars swimming in a midnight sky. I shouldn't have touched it. That was rule number 2, touch nothing personal. But something compelled me, perhaps the same reckless curiosity that had led me to steal books from the library as a child. Hungry for worlds beyond my reach, I extended my hand, fingers trembling slightly, and lifted the watch. It was heavier than I expected, substantial with the weight of luxury and privilege that I would never know. I turned it over in my palm, marveling at the craftsmanship, at the tiny engraving on the back. Time reveals all truths. The sudden blaring of my phone shattered the moment. I jumped, the watch slipping from my fingers. Horror flooded through me as it tumbled toward the hardwood floor. A disaster in slow motion. By some miracle, I caught it against my thigh, fumbling it back into my grasp. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clutched it, palms suddenly slick with sweat. I silenced my phone, my sister calling, probably about Mom's newest prescription, and carefully returned the watch to its position, or what I thought was its position. I continued my cleaning, but the watch seemed to follow me with invisible eyes. By the time I finished the room, doubt had crept in. Had it been lying flat, or tilted slightly on its side? Had the face been turned toward the bed or the door? The more I tried to remember, the more uncertain I became. Mrs. Peterson's voice crackled over the intercom. All staff to the service elevator immediately. Mr. Salvatore is arriving. Panic surged through me. I gathered my supplies with shaking hands, casting one last glance at the watch. It winked at me, smug in its perfection, in its belonging. I didn't belong. That fact had never been clearer. The service hallways were a flurry of activity as staff rushed to disappear before the owner's arrival. I kept my head down, pushing my cart toward the service elevator, where other maids already waited, their expressions a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Did you finish the East Wing?" Mrs. Peterson appeared at my elbow, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Yes, ma'am. Everything's in order." She nodded curtly. "Good. We won't be returning to that section until tomorrow." The elevator doors slid open, and we filed in like silent shadows. As they began to close, the unmistakable sound of the main elevator arriving echoed through the service corridor. My stomach twisted. Mr. Salvatore. Just before the doors sealed us away, I caught a glimpse. Just fragments, really. Polished Italian leather shoes. The edge of what must have been a bespoke suit, a hand adorned with a single platinum ring. And the faintest trace of a scent. Cedarwood and something darker. Something that made me think of forbidden things. The image burned into my mind, haunting me long after I'd returned to my tiny apartment in Queens. That night, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned on my lumpy mattress, the memory of the watch heavy in my thoughts. Something felt wrong, out of place, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. At 3:17 a.m., I bolted upright, cold sweat beading on my forehead. The watch had been moved, not by me, but before I entered the room. It hadn't been on the nightstand yesterday. It had been on the dresser, placed precisely next to a small crystal dish that held cufflinks. I dusted around it, careful not to disturb anything. Someone had moved it. Or worse, it wasn't the same watch. Impossible thoughts swirled through my mind. Had I cleaned the wrong room? No. Impossible. Had someone been watching me? Testing me? The rules echoed in my head, touch nothing personal. I'd broken the cardinal rule. By morning, exhaustion had turned my fear to resignation. If I was fired, I'd find another job. Perhaps not one that paid as well, but I would manage. I always did. I arrived early, anxiety propelling me through the employee entrance and up the service elevator. Mrs. Peterson intercepted me immediately, her face grim. "Maya, Mr. Salvatore's office, now." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Mr. Salvatore wants to see me?" "That's what I said, isn't it?" Her eyes softened fractionally. "He's never requested to speak to staff before." The walk to his office felt like a march to execution. Each step brought me closer to unemployment, to telling my mother we couldn't afford her medication this month. The hallway stretched endlessly, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my practical shoes. The door to his office was imposing. Dark wood with subtle grain patterns that seemed to form faces if you looked too long. I raised my hand to knock, but a voice from within stopped me. "Enter." The single word carried such authority that my body obeyed before my mind could process it. I stepped inside, keeping my eyes fixed on the carpet. "Look at me." I raised my gaze slowly, prepared for anger, for accusation. Nothing could have prepared me for him. Alexander Salvatore didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a predator dressed in human clothing. Tall and broad-shouldered, he dominated the space not just with his physical presence but with something more intangible, an aura of absolute control. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman currency, all sharp angles and classical proportions. But it was his eyes that captured me. Pale blue, almost silver, regarding me with the detached interest of someone studying an unusual specimen. "Maya Reyes," he said, my name sounding different in his mouth, almost musical. 24 years old, 2 years at Prestige Staffing Services, impeccable record, supporting a sick mother and younger sister. Each fact landed like a stone in still water. He knew everything about me. "Sir," I managed, my voice embarrassingly small. "About yesterday. You touched my watch. Not a question." Yes. I'm sorry. It was wrong of me. It won't happen again." A smile curved his lips, not reaching those cold eyes. "No, it won't." He moved around his desk with a predator's grace, and I fought the urge to step back. In his hand, he held the watch. Diamonds catching the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Do you know what this is worth?" he asked, his voice deceptively conversational. I swallowed. "No, sir." $350,000. More than you'll earn in a decade. The number made me dizzy. My mother's entire treatment could be paid for with that sum, and we'd still have enough left to live comfortably for years. Yet, he continued, stopping barely a foot away from me, "when you dropped it, yes, I know about that too. Your concern wasn't for its value. You were worried about having moved it from its proper place." I couldn't read his expression. Was this a test? It wasn't mine to touch. Something flickered in those pale eyes. "Integrity," he murmured, almost to himself. How novel. He extended his hand, the watch resting on his palm. "Hold it." "Sir?" "Hold it," he repeated, an edge creeping into his tone that made it clear this wasn't a request. With trembling fingers, I took the watch, careful to touch only the edges. Up close, it was even more extraordinary, the craftsmanship evident in every tiny detail. It was my father's, Salvatore said, watching me intently. The only thing of his I kept. I didn't know how to respond to this unexpected confidence. It's beautiful. It's also missing. My head snapped up. Missing? His smile was razor sharp now. As of this morning, when I reported it stolen. The police have been most sympathetic. A theft of this magnitude, well, it carries serious charges. The watch suddenly felt like it was burning my skin. But I didn't. Of course you didn't. He plucked it from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm at the contact. But who would believe you over me? The room seemed to shrink, the air thinning. I struggled to breathe as the implication became clear. What do you want? I whispered. Alexander Salvatore studied me with those unnerving eyes, and I had the distinct feeling he was seeing past my uniform, past my skin, directly into the core of me. I want you to marry me. The words hung in the air between us. Absurd, impossible. I waited for the punchline, for some explanation that would make sense of this madness. None came. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Ms. Reyes. Particularly about matters of business. Marriage isn't business, I protested, finding my voice at last. His laugh was low and without humor. Everything is business. In this case, you have something I need. I have something you need. A simple transaction. What could I possibly have that you would need? His eyes traveled over me, not in the leering way I'd experienced from men on the subway, but as if assessing the value of a painting. Legitimacy, respectability, a certain image that my business partners expect. And what do I need? Freedom from prison, financial security for your family, your mother's medical bills paid in full. He tilted his head. Shall I continue? My mind raced, searching for the trap, for the cruel joke. Why me? You could have anyone. Anyone would want my money, he said dismissively. You've proven you don't care about that. You care about doing what's right. That's useful to me. This is insane, I whispered. Perhaps. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. If you accept, the watch was never stolen. You become my fiancé, then my wife. Your family wants for nothing. If you refuse, he shrugged eloquently, the police are quite determined to find the thief of such a valuable item. He turned away, a clear dismissal. Either way, you no longer work here as of today. Mrs. Peterson will see you out. I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Oh, and Maya. He glanced over his shoulder, those pale eyes piercing through me. Don't make the mistake of running. I would find you. I had no doubt that he would. As I gathered my few belongings under Mrs. Peterson's confused supervision, a terrible understanding settled over me. In trying to do the right thing, in being honest, I had somehow triggered this nightmare. And now I faced an impossible choice. Marriage to a dangerous stranger or destruction of everything I loved. The watch had been right after all. Time reveals all truths. And the truth was, my life as I knew it was over. The subway ride home was a blur. Faces passed like ghosts, the rattling of the train merely background noise to the storm in my mind. Marriage. The word itself felt foreign, disconnected from my reality, and marriage to him, to Alexander Salvatore, was beyond comprehension. My tiny apartment greeted me with its familiar shabbiness, the leaky faucet in the kitchenette, the second-hand furniture arranged to hide water stains on the walls, the stack of medical bills on the coffee table, each one stamped with increasingly urgent red lettering. I collapsed onto the sofa, my uniform still on, and pressed my hands against my eyes until colorful patterns swirled in the darkness. What did I really know about Salvatore? The staff whispers painted him as ruthless in business, possessing connections that stretched from Wall Street to places better left unmentioned. There were rumors, always carefully spoken in hushed tones, about the true nature of his wealth. Words like family business took on sinister meanings in these conversations. A mafia boss. That's what they never said aloud, but always implied. My phone buzzed, startling me from my thoughts. A text from an unknown number. A car will collect you at 8 p.m. Dinner, dress appropriately, as my first instinct was to refuse, to barricade myself in this apartment, and pretend none of this was happening. But the reality of my situation pressed down like a physical weight. I had no job. My mother's treatment required money I no longer had access to, and somewhere in the city, paperwork for a theft I didn't commit might already be making its way through the system. I had no real choice. At 7:58 p.m., I stood on the curb outside my building, wearing the only dress I owned that could possibly qualify as appropriate. A navy blue sheath dress I'd bought secondhand for job interviews. My hair fell in loose waves down my back, free from its usual severe bun. The makeup I rarely wore felt like a mask on my face. A sleek black Bentley slid to the curb precisely at 8 p.m. A mountain of a man emerged from the driver's seat, shaved head, neck as thick as my waist, wearing a suit that barely contained his muscular frame. He opened the rear door without a word. Alexander Salvatore sat inside, darkness and luxury surrounding him like a second skin. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than a year of my rent, a blood-red tie the only splash of color. The watch, that damned watch, gleamed on his wrist. Ms. Reyes. He didn't smile, didn't move to make space for me. He simply watched as I hesitated at the threshold of his world. I took a breath and slid into the leather seat beside him, immediately enveloped by his scent. That same cedarwood, and something darker. Something that made my skin prickle with awareness. The car pulled away from the curb silently, the barrier between driver and passengers raised to give the illusion of privacy. Neither of us spoke as we glided through the city streets. I stared out the window, watching my familiar world pass by, feeling as though I was being carried away from everything I knew. You have questions. His voice broke the silence, deep and smooth like aged whiskey. Hundreds, I admitted, still watching the city rather than facing him. Ask them. I turned to him then, studying the harsh planes of his face in the passing streetlights. Why marriage? Why not just hire me to play a role? To be seen with you? A muscle ticked in his jaw. Because I don't do things halfway, Ms. Reyes. And because what I need cannot be accomplished with half measures. And what exactly do you need? His gaze was steady, calculating. My business requires a certain restructuring. The old ways are changing. To secure my position, I need to present a specific image to certain partners and rivals alike. A stable man with a respectable wife is taken more seriously than a bachelor with a reputation. So I'm just part of your image rehabilitation. You say that as if it's a small thing. He leaned forward slightly. Image is everything in my world. Perception creates reality. The car slowed, turning into a private entrance of what appeared to be an exclusive restaurant. Before I could ask another question, we were stopping, the mountain man driver opening the door. Salvatore exited first, then extended his hand to me. I stared at it for a moment before placing my fingers in his. His hand was warm, unexpectedly calloused for a man of such wealth. He didn't release me after I stepped out, but instead tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, pulling me close enough that I could feel the solid wall of his chest against my side. Smile, he murmured, his lips barely moving. We're madly in love. The restaurant was like something from another world. No sign marked its existence, just a discreet door with a single attendant who nodded deferentially as Salvatore approached. Inside, soft lighting illuminated what appeared to be only a dozen tables, each set far from the others, creating islands of privacy in the dimly lit space. Every head turned as we entered. I felt the weight of calculating gazes, the silent assessments and whispered questions. Alexander Salvatore with an unknown woman. A nobody, a maid. I straightened my spine, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. The maitre d' led us to a table in the corner, the best in the house, I guessed, based on the subtle nods of acknowledgement Salvatore received as we passed. A bottle of wine already waited, breathing in a crystal decanter. Your usual table, Mr. D. Salvatore, the maitre d' murmured, pulling out my chair with practiced elegance. Salvatore's hand lingered at the small of my back before I sat, a possessive touch that sent unwelcome heat racing up my spine. He took his seat across from me, those pale eyes never leaving my face. My usual guests will be joining shortly, he said once we were alone. Before they arrive, you should know what's expected. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I reminded him, clinging to this last shred of autonomy. His smile was cold. And yet, here you are. The truth of that statement stung. I had walked willingly into his car, into this restaurant. I was already playing his game, whether I admitted it or not. "These men are business associates," he continued. "They believe we've been seeing each other privately for some time. Tonight is merely the public acknowledgement of our relationship. And if I don't play along?" His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in those pale eyes. "Then your mother's medical insurance might experience unfortunate complications. Your sister's scholarship to NYU might be reconsidered. The apartment you live in might suddenly be sold to a developer interested in immediate renovation." He sipped his wine. "But these things wouldn't happen if you were the fiancé of Alexander Salvatore." Each threat was delivered in the same conversational tone one might use to discuss the weather. The casualness of it chilled me more than any outburst of anger could have. "You've investigated my entire life. Knowledge is power, Ms. Reyes. I make it a point never to enter a situation unprepared." Before I could respond, I noticed his attention shift to something beyond my shoulder. His expression transformed subtly. Still controlled, still dominant, but with a new edge of performative warmth. "Ah, Vincent, Carlo. Right on time." I turned to see two men approaching our table. Both wore expensive suits and expressions of barely concealed curiosity. One was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and a face mapped with the lines of someone who smiled rarely, but genuinely. The other was younger, closer to Salvatore's age, with sharp features and hungry eyes that assessed me with naked interest. Salvatore stood, extending his hand to the older man first. "Vincent, good to see you." Then to the younger, "Carlo." There was a subtle change in his tone, slightly cooler, more formal. "Alexander." The older man, Vincent, replied warmly. "And who is this lovely creature you've been hiding from us?" Salvatore's hand returned to the small of my back, guiding me to stand beside him. "This is Maya Reyes, my fiancée." The word landed like a stone in still water. Vincent's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Carlo's expression flickered between disbelief and something darker. "Fiancé?" Vincent recovered first, taking my offered hand and pressing it between both of his. "My dear, what a delight. Alexander has been most secretive about you." "The best treasures are kept hidden," Salvatore said, his arm snaking around my waist, pulling me against him with subtle pressure. Until the right moment, I forced my lips into a smile, leaning into him as if this proximity was natural, desired. He's a man who values his privacy. "And you, my dear?" Vincent asked, studying me with shrewd eyes. "What do you value?" I felt Salvatore's attention sharpen, waiting for my answer. This was a test, my first. "Loyalty," I said, the word coming unbidden to my lips. "And truth, even when it's difficult to hear." Vincent's smile deepened, genuine approval warming his eyes. "She'll be good for you, Alexander. God knows you need someone who'll stand her ground." Carlo finally spoke, his voice smooth as oil on water. "How did you two meet?" Alexander doesn't typically move in diverse social circles. The subtle barb wasn't lost on me. I was being reminded of my place, or rather, my lack of one in their world. Salvatore's grip tightened fractionally on my waist. Maya was working at the Vanguard Gallery opening, the one showcasing the Caravaggio acquisition. I kept my expression neutral, following his lead. I'd never set foot in an art gallery that wasn't free to the public. She was the only person there who recognized the forgery they were trying to pass off as authentic. His thumb traced small circles against my hip, a disturbingly intimate gesture. "Intelligence is irresistible," Vincent laughed. "Indeed it is. Well, let's sit and celebrate this unexpected news." Throughout dinner, I played my part. I smiled at the right moments, spoke when spoken to, and maintained the careful facade of a woman in love with a dangerous man. Salvatore never released me entirely. His hand always found its way back to mine, to my shoulder, to my waist. A constant reminder of his claim, of my captivity. The conversation flowed around topics I barely understood, property developments with thinly veiled implications of activities that couldn't possibly be legitimate, political connections mentioned with knowing looks, references to family matters that clearly had nothing to do with blood relations. I was in the presence of monsters who wore bespoke suits and drank 100-year-old whiskey, and I was being claimed by the most dangerous one of all. As the evening wore on, I excused myself to the restroom, desperate for a moment alone to collect myself. In the elegant privacy of the marble-lined space, I gripped the edge of the sink, Staring at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. The careful makeup, the styled hair, the look in my eyes like a trapped animal assessing escape routes. The door opened behind me. I expected another patron, but instead, Carlos slipped inside, locking the door behind him. Alarm surged through me. "What are you—" "Shh." He moved closer, his cologne too strong, too sweet. I just wanted a moment to talk privately, to understand. I straightened, keeping the sink between us. "Understand what? What you're really after?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Alexander doesn't fall in love, certainly not with, well..." His gaze traveled over me dismissively. "So I have to wonder what's really happening here." "That's between Alexander and me." I was surprised by the steadiness of my voice. He laughed, a sound entirely without humor. "You're good, very convincing, but let me give you some friendly advice." He leaned forward, invading my space. "Whatever he's paying you, whatever game you're playing, get out now. Alexander doesn't share his toys. Once you're his, you'll never be free again." "I should get back to the table," I said, sidestepping toward the door. He moved faster than I expected, his hand gripping my upper arm. "He'll destroy you, you know. It's what he does. Collects perfect things and breaks them just to prove he can." Before I could respond, the door crashed open, the lock splintering as if it were made of matchsticks. Salvatore filled the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Carlo released me immediately, stepping back. "Alexander, I was just getting out." Salvatore's voice was soft, terrifyingly so. "Now." Carlo slipped past him, careful not to make contact. Salvatore's eyes never left me, assessing, calculating. "Did he touch you?" The question surprised me. "Just my arm." Something flashed in those pale eyes, something primitive and violent. He stepped forward, hands rising to frame my face. His touch was gentler than I expected, thumbs brushing my cheekbones as he studied me. "No one touches what's mine," he said softly, the words falling between us like a promise. Or a threat. I should have been repulsed by his possessiveness. Instead, I felt something darker, more primal respond within me, a shameful heat that curled low in my belly. "I'm not yours," I whispered, the words lacking conviction even to my own ears. His smile was knowing, predatory. "Not yet. But you will be." He leaned forward, his breath warm against my ear. "You already know you're going to say yes to my proposal, Maya. I can see it in your eyes, the resignation, the surrender. But I don't just want your surrender." His lips brushed the shell of my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "I want your submission, your loyalty, your fire." He pulled back, those pale eyes burning into mine. "And I'll have it, one way or another." My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. Because the most terrifying thing wasn't his threat. It was that some dark, hidden part of me wanted to give him exactly what he demanded. As he led me back to the table, his hand possessive at the small of my back, I realized I was walking willingly into a gilded cage, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to find the key. Block 3. Morning light filtered through my thin curtains, painting stripes across my bed. I hadn't slept. How could I, when my mind replayed the events of the previous night on an endless loop, the restaurant, the business associates, Carlo's warning, and most of all, Salvatore's words in the bathroom, his breath hot against my skin. "I don't just want your surrender, I want your submission, your loyalty, your fire." I pushed myself up, wincing at the stiffness in my neck from tossing and turning all night. My phone screen showed 7:02 a.m. and 3 missed calls from my sister, Elena. I should call her back, but what would I say? "Sorry I missed your calls. I was busy being blackmailed into marriage by a man who's probably a Mafia boss." The absurdity of my situation hit me anew, a wave of hysterical laughter bubbling up and dying in my throat. A sharp knock at my door cut through the morning quiet. I froze. No one visited this early. The knock came again, more insistent. I crept to the door, peering through the peephole. A woman stood there, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like a corporate lawyer or perhaps a high-end real estate agent. Definitely not someone who belonged in my rundown building. "Ms. Reyes?" she called through the door. "My name is Vanessa Chen. Mr. Salvatore sent me." Of course he did. I opened the door, suddenly aware of my threadbare pajamas and tangled hair. "What does he want?" Vanessa's expression remained perfectly neutral. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, watching as she entered my tiny apartment, her assessing gaze taking in the water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the general shabbiness I'd become blind to. "Mr. Salvatore has instructed me to assist you with the transition," she said, placing a sleek leather portfolio on my coffee table. "Transition? To your new living arrangements." She spoke as if this were the most reasonable thing in the world. "You'll be moving into Mr. Salvatore's residence today." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "I haven't agreed to anything." Vanessa's perfect eyebrow arched slightly. "Haven't you? You attended dinner last night. You were introduced as his fiancée." That was... I struggled to find the right word. Coerced. "Be that as it may," she continued smoothly, "the wheels are in motion. Your presence is expected at the penthouse by noon. And if I refuse?" She opened the portfolio, removing several documents. "Your mother has been transferred to Mount Sinai's private wing as of 6 a.m. this morning. Her new treatment protocol begins at 2 p.m. She slid a document toward me, medical authorization forms with my forged signature. "Your sister's tuition has been paid in full for the remainder of her degree program." Another document, financial receipts from NYU. My hands trembled as I stared at the papers. He's already done all this, without my consent? Mr. Salvatore is a man of action, not patience. She removed one final document. "This is the police report regarding his stolen watch. Currently, it names you as the primary suspect. It can be filed or shredded, depending on your decision." The trap was complete. He had calculated every angle, predicted my every move. Even my refusal had been anticipated and countered. What exactly does he expect from me? My voice sounded hollow, defeated. "To play your part." Vanessa's tone softened fractionally. "Mr. Salvatore is hosting a gathering tonight. Several important business associates and their families will be in attendance. You will be introduced as his fiancée. The story is that you've been dating privately for 6 months. He proposed last week. And after that? How long does this charade continue? Until he decides otherwise." Her bluntness was almost refreshing. "A car will be here at 11 a.m. Pack only what you need immediately. The rest will be handled." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Ms. Reyes, a piece of advice? Mr. Salvatore values adaptability. Those who adapt survive in his world. Those who resist..." She let the sentence hang unfinished in the air between us. After she left, I sank onto my sofa, surrounded by the evidence of Salvatore's power. He had already insinuated himself into every aspect of my life, making decisions about my mother's medical care, my sister's education, my living situation. And I had no choice but to accept it. Or did I? I could run, take Elena and Mom and disappear, but how far would we get before he found us? And what would happen then? Don't make the mistake of running. I would find you. I believed him completely. At exactly 11 a.m., a sleek black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. The same mountain of a man from last night, Salvatore's driver and apparent bodyguard, stood beside it, scanning the street with watchful eyes. I approached with a single suitcase containing the bare essentials: clothes, toiletries, the few family photos I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else I owned could fit in a few boxes, but even that felt like too much to bring into Salvatore's world. The driver, who introduced himself only as Dimitri, took my suitcase and opened the rear door. I expected to find Salvatore inside, but the back seat was empty. Both relieved and strangely disappointed, I slid onto the leather seat. The ride to Manhattan passed in silence. I watched my neighborhood recede, then Queens, then the East River, each familiar landmark falling away like pieces of myself I was leaving behind. Midtown rose before us, a forest of glass and steel. Dimitri navigated through traffic with practiced ease, eventually pulling into a private underground garage beneath one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. The kind of building where apartments started at 8 figures, and the wait list for residency was years long. The elevator required a keycard and fingerprint scan to access the penthouse level. As we ascended, my stomach twisted with anxiety. What was waiting for me up there? What kind of life was I stepping into? The elevator opened directly into a private foyer. Mrs. Peterson stood waiting, her usual clipboard clutched to her chest. Her eyes widened at the sight of me. "Ms. Reyes," she said, her professional mask slipping momentarily. "Mr. Salvatore explained everything this morning. The staff has been briefed." I could only imagine what lies he had told them. "Where is he?" "In meetings until this afternoon. I'm to show you to your rooms and help you prepare for tonight's gathering." She gestured for me to follow. "This way, please." I had cleaned the penthouse for months, but always as an outsider, a shadow moving through rooms where I didn't belong. "Now, Mrs. Peterson led me through the main living areas toward the east wing, Salvatore's private domain. "Your suite connects to Mr. Salvatore's through here," she explained, opening a door I had never noticed before. Concealed within the wood paneling, the suite was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and pale blue. A sitting room with custom bookshelves and a marble fireplace. A bedroom centered around a massive 4-poster bed dressed in linens that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A bathroom with a soaking tub and separate rainfall shower. A walk-in closet that could have housed a small family. "Your things have been arranged here," Mrs. Peterson said, opening the closet door. I stepped inside, expecting to find my pitiful collection of second-hand clothes and bargain store basics. Instead, rows of designer garments hung in perfect order. Dresses, suits, casual wear, all in my size. Shoes lined one wall, handbags another. Drawers revealed lingerie, still with tags from boutiques I'd only read about in magazines. "There must be a mistake," I managed, fingering the silk of a midnight blue gown. "These aren't mine." "Mr. Salvatore had them delivered this morning. For tonight, he suggested this." Mrs. Peterson indicated an evening gown in deep emerald. The price tag was still attached. $5,000. More than 3 months of my salary. My head spun. The speed at which Salvatore moved was disorienting. Less than 48 hours ago, I had been a maid cleaning his home. Now I stood in a closet filled with clothes worth more than everything I'd ever owned, preparing to pretend to be his fiancée. "What does he want from me?" I whispered, more to myself than to Mrs. Peterson. Her expression softened unexpectedly. "Mr. Salvatore is complex. I've worked for him for 7 years, and I still don't claim to understand him fully." She hesitated, then added, "He's never brought anyone here before, not like this." The implications of that statement hung in the air as she excused herself, promising to return later to help me prepare for the evening. Alone, I wandered through the suite, trailing my fingers over unfamiliar luxury. Every item seemed chosen with specific intent. The books on the shelves included titles I'd mentioned loving during rare conversations with other staff members. The bathroom products were the same brand I'd splurged on for my birthday last year, when Elena had given me a gift card. Even the bed sheets were in a shade of blue I'd once absent-mindedly called my favorite while cleaning the linen closet. He had been watching me, studying me, long before the incident with the watch. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I unpacked my small suitcase, placing family photos on the nightstand. My mother before her illness had hollowed her out. Elena at her high school graduation. The 3 of us at Coney Island years ago. These fragments of my real life looked out of place among the carefully curated luxury. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed me. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress yielding beneath me like a cloud. Just a short rest, I told myself, curling onto my side fully clothed. Just a moment to gather my strength. I woke to darkness and the sensation of being watched. Salvatore stood in the doorway between our suites, his powerful frame silhouetted against the light behind him. I bolted upright, disoriented and vulnerable. "You've been asleep for hours," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I told them not to wake you." I scrambled to my feet, suddenly aware of my rumpled clothes and messy hair. "What time is it?" "Nearly 7. Guests will begin arriving at 8. He stepped into the room, and I fought the urge to back away. "Did Ms. Chen explain everything? That I'm to pretend to be madly in love with you?" "Yes, that was covered." His mouth curved in that not-quite smile that never reached his eyes. "Not pretend, Maya. Embody. There's a difference." He moved closer, and I held my ground though every instinct screamed to retreat. He smelled of that same intoxicating blend of cedarwood and something darker, something that made my pulse quicken despite myself. Tonight is important, he continued. The people attending need to believe completely in our relationship. Why? What's the point of all this? I gestured to the room, the clothes. What game are you playing? Something dangerous flickered in his pale eyes. It's not a game, it's survival. Before I could question him further, he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. I flinched at the unexpected contact. You're afraid of me, he observed, his tone making it impossible to tell if this pleased or disappointed him. Shouldn't I be? You've threatened my family, my freedom. You've forced me into whatever this is. Not forced, he corrected. Incentivized. A surge of anger cut through my fear. Is that what you tell yourself to justify manipulation and blackmail? For a moment, genuine surprise crossed his features, quickly masked by his usual control. Interesting. Most people wouldn't dare speak to me that way. Most people probably have more to lose or less courage. His gaze intensified, studying me with renewed interest. The bathroom downstairs has been prepared for you. Bath drawn. Everything you need laid out. Wear the emerald dress. I'll send someone to help with hair and makeup in 20 minutes. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Tonight you'll notice a man named Dominic Russo. Mid-50s. Scar on his right cheek. Stay away from him. Why? Salvatore's expression hardened. Because I said so. After he left, I remained frozen for several moments, trying to process the encounter. The power dynamics between us were constantly shifting. He controlled every aspect of the situation, yet seemed almost intrigued by my defiance. The bathroom downstairs was a marble sanctuary, steam rising from a massive soaking tub filled with fragrant water. I sank into the heat, allowing it to ease the tension from my muscles, if not my mind. Everything had been arranged with meticulous attention to detail. My preferred bath products, plush towels warmed on a heated rack, even a glass of white wine placed within easy reach. Golden handcuffs. That's what this luxury represented. The more comfortable I became in this world, the harder it would be to leave, if leaving was even an option. By 8 o'clock, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The emerald dress hugged my figure before flowing to the floor in liquid silk. My hair had been arranged in an elegant updo by a stylist who had arrived precisely when Salvatore said she would. My makeup was flawless, enhancing rather than masking my features. Emerald earrings that matched the dress perfectly hung from my ears, another gift from my captor. I looked like I belonged in Salvatore's world. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. A soft knock at the door announced Mrs. Peterson. Mr. Salvatore is waiting for you in the main living room. The first guests have arrived. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was a performance, nothing more. I could play a part for one night. Salvatore stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittering behind him like his personal kingdom. He wore a black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the trim line of his waist. The suit was undoubtedly bespoke, fitting him with a precision that bordered on obscene. The diamonds in his watch caught the light as he turned, seeing me enter. For a moment, something unguarded flashed across his face, something that looked almost like genuine appreciation. Then his mask slipped back into place. Perfect, he said, extending his hand to me. I crossed the room, hyper-aware of the other guests already watching us with curious eyes. As I reached him, Salvatore pulled me close, his lips brushing my ear. Remember, he murmured, we're madly in love. You can't keep your hands off me. I can barely control myself around you. His words sent an unwelcome heat through me. I forced a smile, placing my hand in his. I'm an excellent actress. We'll see. The gathering was smaller than I expected. Perhaps 30 people, all exuding the same aura of wealth and subtle danger as Salvatore himself. Vincent from the previous night was there with the elegant woman I assumed was his wife. Carlo lurked near the bar, his hungry gaze following me until Salvatore's cold stare made him look away. And then there was Dominic Russo. I identified him immediately by the scar on his cheek, a pale line that ran from his right eye to the corner of his mouth. Unlike the others, who wore their wealth like a second skin, Russo seemed uncomfortable in his expensive suit, constantly adjusting his collar as if it choked him. Salvatore kept me at his side as he moved through the room, one hand always touching me, at my waist, the small of my back, fingers entwined with mine. He introduced me as my fiancé, Maya, with a possessive edge that left no room for questions. I smiled and nodded and played my part, all the while feeling Russo's gaze following us, calculating and cold. Alexander? A woman's voice cut through the general conversation, sharp as a blade. Aren't you going to introduce me to your fiancé? We turned to face a woman in her early 30s, stunning in a red dress that left little to the imagination. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves to her shoulders, her makeup flawless, her jewelry subtle but clearly worth a fortune. Salvatore's hand tightened fractionally at my waist. Sophia, I wasn't sure you'd make it. The woman, Sophia, smiled with all the warmth of an Arctic winter. And miss meeting the woman who finally captured the elusive Alexander Salvatore? Never. Her gaze raked over me, assessing and dismissing in the same moment. She's younger than I expected. Maya, this is Sophia Valenti, Salvatore said, his tone carefully neutral. Vincent's niece. Understanding dawned immediately. The hungry looks Carlo had given me, the hostility radiating from Sophia. There was history here. Salvatore and Sophia had been involved, perhaps even expected to marry in some business arrangement between families. And I had unknowingly disrupted those plans. It's lovely to meet you, I lied, extending my hand. Sophia took it, her grip painfully tight. Likewise. Alexander never mentioned he was seeing anyone. It's also sudden. When you know, I replied, leaning into Salvatore with practiced ease. And how exactly did you two meet? Alexander keeps such exclusive company. Before Salvatore could repeat the gallery story from the previous night, I decided to take control of the narrative. I was his maid, actually. A shocked silence fell over those close enough to hear. Salvatore stiffened beside me, his fingers digging into my waist. Sophia's perfect features contorted with disbelief. His what? I smiled sweetly. His maid. I was cleaning his penthouse while working for Prestige Staffing. He asked me out after I returned his watch that had fallen behind the dresser. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, while completely reframing the dynamic of our meeting. In my version, Salvatore was the one pursuing me, not threatening and manipulating me. Sophia looked to Salvatore, clearly expecting him to deny this absurd story. Instead, he smiled, a genuine one that transformed his harsh features, making him almost devastatingly handsome. She turned me down 3 times, he added, looking at me with what appeared to be genuine affection. Said she didn't date employers. I had to fire her just to get her to agree to dinner. The perfect blend of truth and fiction. I stared at him, momentarily thrown by his ability to adapt so smoothly to my improvisation. How quaint. Sophia managed, her composure cracking. If you'll excuse me, I need a drink. As she stalked off, Salvatore leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. Clever, he whispered, but dangerous. Don't improvise again without warning me. I thought you valued adaptability, I countered softly. His low chuckle vibrated against my skin. I'm beginning to see why you intrigue me, Maya Reyes. The night continued, a blur of introductions and veiled conversations laden with subtext I couldn't fully grasp. I played my role, smiling and engaging when necessary, always aware of Salvatore's presence at my side. Several times I caught Russo watching us, his gaze calculating. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone to regroup. As I returned, a hand grabbed my arm, pulling me into a darkened study off the main hallway. Dominic Russo's scarred face loomed in the dim light. So, you're Alexander's new toy, he said, his breath sour with whiskey. Pretty little thing. Not his usual type. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened painfully. Let go of me. You don't belong in this world, girl. You're just a pawn in whatever game he's playing with the Valenti family. His face drew closer, but pawns can be useful. Fear surged through me, but anger quickly followed. I was tired of being manipulated, threatened, treated like an object to be moved around a board by powerful men. I said, let go. I drove my knee upward, connecting solidly with his groin. Russo doubled over with a strangled groan. I turned to flee, only to find Salvatore filling the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him stood Dimitri, and another man I recognized as part of his security team. Take him downstairs, Salvatore said, his voice terrifyingly soft. We'll discuss this. Transgression later. The men moved forward, grabbing Russo by the arms. He didn't resist, his eyes fixed on Salvatore. This changes nothing, Russo spat. The old arrangements stand, no matter what pretty distraction you parade around. Once they had removed him, Salvatore turned to me, his pale eyes blazing with an emotion I couldn't name. Did he hurt you? The concern seemed genuine, throwing me off balance. No, I'm fine. You should have called for me. There was an edge to his voice that might have been anger or fear. I handled it. I straightened my dress, trying to reclaim my composure. Isn't that what you want? Someone who can adapt and survive in your world? He studied me for a long moment. You continue to surprise me, Maya Reyes. Good. I wouldn't want to become predictable. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Never that. He offered his arm. Shall we return to our guests? The night is almost over. As we rejoined the party, I felt a subtle shift in the dynamic between us. The lines of captor and captive had blurred, complicated by something I wasn't ready to name. Something dangerous and intoxicating that whispered of power and desire and the thin line between fear and fascination. I had entered the lion's den willingly, and some reckless part of me wanted to stay. Days blurred into weeks as I adjusted to my new reality. The gilded cage of Alexander Salvatore's world grew more comfortable and more confining with each passing day. After the night of the gathering, something had changed between us. The overt threats disappeared, replaced by an unspoken understanding. I would play my part, and my family would remain protected. My mother's health improved under the care of Manhattan's finest specialists. Elena called weekly, bubbling with stories of university life. Blissfully unaware of the devil's bargain I'd made for her freedom, Salvatore and I settled into a strange routine. We slept in separate bedrooms, connected by the door he never fully closed. We shared breakfast each morning, he reading financial reports, me scrolling through online courses I'd enrolled in with his enigmatic encouragement. We attended events together several nights a week, my arm linked through his as we navigated the treacherous waters of his social circle. To the outside world, we were madly in love, the powerful businessman and the former maid who had captured his heart. A modern fairy tale that everyone seemed eager to believe, despite its absurdity. In private, we circled each other like wary predators, neither willing to reveal too much. He never touched me beyond what was necessary for our public performances. Yet I felt his gaze following me when he thought I wasn't looking, assessing, calculating, perhaps even admiring. I learned pieces of his business, legitimate investments in real estate and technology, shadowy dealings with powerful people across the city. No one ever spoke directly of illegal activities, but the implications hung in every carefully worded conversation, every sudden silence when I entered a room. I also learned about Sofia Valenti and the marriage that had been all but arranged between Salvatore and Vincent's niece, a union of two powerful families that would have consolidated territories and prevented bloodshed. My presence had disrupted this careful balance, earning me Sofia's undisguised hatred and the curiosity of everyone in their circle. Dominic Russo disappeared after the night of the gathering. No one mentioned him, but I noticed increased security around the penthouse, Dimitri's watchful presence whenever I left the building. One morning, exactly 6 weeks after I'd moved in, Salvatore entered the kitchen as I was finishing my coffee. "We're having dinner with your family tonight," he announced without preamble. I nearly dropped my cup. "What?" "Your mother has been asking to meet me. It seems my absence has been noted." Of course it had. In my weekly hospital visits, I'd maintained the fiction that I was dating Alexander Salvatore, that we were taking things slowly, that he was often traveling for business. I hadn't dared mention engagement or marriage, hoping to shield my mother from the complex truth. "That's not necessary," I said carefully. "It is if we're to maintain the narrative." His tone left no room for argument. "I've arranged for a private room at her treatment center. Your sister will join us." Panic clawed at my throat. "Alexander, please, don't drag them into this." His expression softened fractionally. "I'm not the villain you believe me to be, Maya. You blackmailed me into pretending to be your fiancé, and yet here you are, 6 weeks later, still wearing my ring." He nodded toward the enormous diamond that weighed down my left hand, another prop in our elaborate show, still in my home, sharing my life. No chains, no locks. You could leave any time. Could I? The question haunted me as I dressed for dinner that evening. My mother's treatment was paid through a private foundation that could withdraw support at any time. Elena's tuition, her apartment, her future, all rested on Salvatore's goodwill. But it wasn't just fear that kept me here. It was the disturbing realization that some part of me had begun to crave this life. The luxury, yes, but also the sharp-edged dance with Alexander, the verbal sparring, the moments when his mask slipped, revealing glimpses of something almost human beneath the monster. I chose a simple blue dress for dinner, elegant but not ostentatious. When I emerged from my suite, Salvatore waited in the hallway. As impeccably dressed as always in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the lean strength of his frame, his gaze traveled over me, lingering on the gentle waves of my hair falling loose around my shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said, the compliment offered as a simple statement of fact. The private room at the treatment center had been transformed. Gone were the clinical furnishings, replaced with an elegant dining table, soft lighting, flowers that filled the space with fragrance. My mother sat in a comfortable chair by the window, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. Elena paced nervously, stopping mid-stride when we entered. "Maya." My mother's face lit up. She struggled to rise, and I rushed to her side. "Don't get up, Mom." I hugged her gently, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "So this is the mysterious Alexander." She extended her hand, studying him with the shrewd gaze that had never missed anything throughout my childhood. Salvatore took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Mrs. Reyes, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Maya speaks of you constantly. Does she?" My mother's eyes twinkled. "She's been quite mysterious about you." Elena hugged me fiercely, whispering in my ear, "He's gorgeous." "Why didn't you tell me?" I forced a smile, watching as Salvatore greeted my sister with practiced charm. He pulled out chairs for both my mother and Elena, his manners impeccable. Throughout dinner, a meal prepared by a private chef and served by discreet staff, I waited for something to go wrong. For Salvatore to reveal his true nature, to say something threatening, to somehow expose our arrangement for the sham it was. Instead, he was perfect. He answered my mother's gentle probing with carefully constructed half-truths that aligned with the fiction I'd created. He expressed genuine interest in Elena's studies. He charmed them both effortlessly, just as he had charmed his way into my life. "Tell me, Alexander," my mother said as dessert was served. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" "Mom," I protested, mortification heating my cheeks. Salvatore's hand covered mine, warm and steadying. "It's a fair question." He turned to my mother, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. "I intend to marry her, Mrs. Reyes, with your blessing." The sincerity in his voice was so convincing that for a moment, even I believed him. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Maya has always been my strong one. She sacrificed so much for our family. She deserves someone who recognizes her worth." "I recognize it," Salvatore said softly, "every day." Later, as we rode back to the penthouse in silence, I stared out the window at the passing city lights, trying to process what had happened. "Your mother is remarkable," Salvatore said finally. "I see where you get your strength. Don't." My voice was sharp with emotion. "Don't pretend this is real." "What is real, Maya?" He turned to face me, his pale eyes intent in the dim light of the car. "The circumstances that brought us together? Or what's happened since? This is business for you. A transaction." "Is it?" His hand moved to my face, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with unexpected tenderness. "Then why can't I stop thinking about you? Why do I find myself creating excuses to be in the same room with you? Why does the thought of you leaving fill me with dread?" I pulled away, confused by the emotion in his voice, by my own reaction to his touch. "Stop. This isn't part of our arrangement. Perhaps the arrangement has changed." Before I could respond, the car stopped in front of our building. Dimitri opened the door, and the moment shattered. That night, I lay awake in my bed, replaying Salvatore's words. Perhaps the arrangement has changed. What did that mean? What did he want from me now? The door between our rooms stood partially open as always. Through it, I heard him moving restlessly, his footsteps pacing the floor. At least I wasn't the only one who couldn't sleep. Eventually, I rose, wrapping myself in a silk robe that had appeared in my closet weeks ago. I moved to the doorway, watching as Salvatore stood at his window, the city lights illuminating his powerful silhouette. "Alexander," I said softly. He turned, and the naked emotion on his face stole my breath. Longing, confusion, desire. All the things I'd been fighting within myself. "What are we doing?" I asked. He crossed the room slowly, stopping an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the intoxicating scent that was uniquely his. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, vulnerability replacing his usual control. "This began as strategy, as business. But you've become," he struggled for words, "an unprecedented occurrence, necessary. Necessary. To my peace of mind, to my ability to function, to my—" He reached for me, his hand hovering just above my cheek without making contact. "I find myself wanting things I have no right to want, Maya. I should have stepped back, maintained the barrier between us." Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes closing as his palm cradled my face. "What do you want?" I whispered. His thumb traced my lower lip. "Everything. All of you. Not because of threats or arrangements, but because you choose it. Choose me." The honesty in his voice undid me. 6 weeks of tension, of fear and confusion and unwanted desire crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I rose on tiptoes, pressing my lips to his. His response was immediate and overwhelming. Alexander's arms encircled me, pulling me against the solid wall of his chest as his mouth claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath. There was nothing gentle in this first real kiss. It was possession, need, the culmination of weeks of tension finally breaking. My hands found his shoulders, his neck, the short hair at the nape that was softer than I'd imagined. He walked us backward until my spine met the doorframe, his body pressing into mine with delicious pressure. His tongue traced the seam of my lips, seeking entry, and I opened to him willingly, desperately. A low groan rumbled from his chest as the kiss deepened, his hands sliding down my sides, over my hips, gathering the silk of my robe in his fists. My head swam with sensation, with the taste of him, whiskey and mint, and something darker that made my knees weak. It was madness. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps, or simply the inevitable result of 6 weeks of forced proximity to a man whose danger and power exerted their own gravitational pull. But in that moment, I didn't care about the psychology. I only knew that I wanted, needed, this connection. Alexander pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged, his pale eyes dark with desire. "Maya," he said, my name a prayer or a curse on his lips. "Tell me to stop." "No," I whispered, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. "Don't stop." His forehead pressed against mine, our breath mingling in the narrow space between us. "If we cross this line," he said, voice strained with the effort of control, "everything changes. There's no going back. I know." And I did know. Knew that whatever game we'd been playing, whatever arrangement we'd made, was about to transform into something far more complex, more dangerous. "I don't want to go back." He studied my face, searching for hesitation, for fear. Finding none, he lifted me into his arms with effortless strength, carrying me toward his bed. My heart hammered against my ribs, anticipation and nervousness tangling in my stomach as he laid me gently on sheets that smelled of him. Alexander stood over me for a moment, his gaze traveling the length of my body with such intensity I could almost feel it like a physical touch. Then he was beside me, around me, his weight a welcome anchor as his mouth found mine again. What followed was a revelation, not just of physical pleasure, though there was plenty of that as we explored each other's bodies with increasing urgency. The true revelation was in the vulnerability Alexander showed, the control he surrendered as he whispered my name against my skin, as he shuddered beneath my touch. For those hours, the power imbalance between us dissolved. We were simply a man and a woman discovering each other, learning the geography of pleasure and need that existed between us. Afterward, I lay in the circle of his arms, my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, raising goosebumps in their wake. "I never expected you," he murmured, his voice rumbling beneath my ear. I tilted my head to look at him. What did you expect when you forced me into this arrangement? His expression turned thoughtful. Compliance. Resentment. Eventually, resignation. His fingers trailed up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. Not this. This connection. The word seemed to surprise him as much as me. I've never allowed myself to connect with anyone. It's too dangerous in my world. The reminder of exactly what his world entailed sobered me. I pushed myself up on one elbow. Alexander, what exactly do you do? Really? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, careful. My family has controlled certain aspects of New York's economy for 3 generations: import, export, protection, conflict resolution, euphemisms for organized crime. I had known, of course, but hearing him acknowledge it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. The Valenti family controls other territories, he continued. For decades, we've maintained an uneasy peace. My marriage to Sophia was meant to cement that peace. So when you brought me into this, I said slowly, you were deliberately sabotaging that arrangement. He nodded. Vincent was making demands I couldn't accept. Using the marriage to leverage control over my operations, I needed a reason to break the agreement without triggering open conflict. I was your excuse. The realization stung, despite everything. A nobody he couldn't object to without losing face. Alexander's hand cupped my cheek, turning my face to his. At first, he admitted. But you became much more than that. You became necessary. I finished for him, remembering his word from earlier. Yes. His thumb traced my lower lip. Necessary. Essential. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that what had happened between us was genuine, not another calculated move in a game I barely understood. What happens now? I asked, voicing the question that hung between us. Now we adapt. His expression turned serious. Dominic Russo was Vincent's man. He was gathering information, looking for weaknesses. The night of the gathering, when he approached you, he was testing my reaction. A chill ran through me as I remembered Russo's hands on me, his threatening words, testing to see if I really mattered to you. Yes, and I showed my hand. Alexander's jaw tightened. I had him removed, permanently. The casual way he referenced murder should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a disturbing sense of safety, of protection. Stockholm Syndrome, indeed. Vincent knows the marriage arrangement is truly off the table now, Alexander continued. He's been making moves, testing boundaries. The next few weeks will be delicate. Dangerous, I translated. For both of us. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. Maya, I need you to understand something. In my world, attachment is vulnerability. Caring for someone gives your enemies a target. Fear curled in my stomach. Are you saying this was a mistake? I'm saying that to protect you, to protect what we have. I need to be more careful than I've ever been. His eyes held mine, intense and serious. It means increased security, restrictions on your movements, protocols you must follow without question. A gilded cage with even thicker bars. And if I can't accept those terms? Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. Then I'll set you free. Your family will remain protected. You'll want for nothing. But we won't see each other again. The thought was surprisingly painful. 6 weeks ago, I would have leapt at the chance for freedom. Now, the idea of leaving Alexander, of returning to a life without him, left me hollow. When did this happen? I whispered. When did you become someone I don't want to leave? His smile was sad, knowing. The same time you became someone I can't let go. 2 months later, I stood at the windows of our penthouse, watching the lights of Manhattan shimmer in the evening air. My mother had been discharged from the hospital last week, moved into a luxurious apartment where Elena visited her between classes. They were safe, happy, their futures secured by the man whose ring I now wore not as a prop, but as a promise. Behind me, I heard the elevator arrive, followed by familiar footsteps. Alexander appeared in the reflection of the window, his expression softening when he saw me waiting. The tightness around his eyes told me today's business had been stressful, probably dangerous. I didn't ask. There were boundaries we maintained. walls around certain aspects of his life that I chose not to breach. He kept the darkness away from me as much as possible, and I gave him a sanctuary where he could simply be a man in love, not the feared head of a criminal empire. His arms encircled me from behind, pulling me against his chest. I leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of him, the security I found in his embrace. "I missed you," he murmured against my hair. "You were only gone a few hours." "Too long." His lips traced the curve of my neck. "Any time away from you is too long." I turned in his arms, studying the face that had become so dear to me. The harsh lines that had once frightened me now spoke of strength, of protection. The pale eyes that had been cold when we met now warmed when they looked at me. "I love you," I said simply. His breath caught, as it always did when I spoke those words. For Alexander, raised in a world where vulnerability meant weakness, where attachment was liability, love remained a miracle he couldn't quite believe. "And I love you." He kissed me softly, reverently. More than I thought possible. We were not a fairy tale. There was no perfect ending for a man in Alexander's position, for the woman who chose to stand beside him. There would always be danger lurking at the edges of our happiness, enemies waiting for weakness, the shadow of his world threatening to darken ours. But as his lips found mine with increasing urgency, as his hands traced the curves of my body with familiar hunger, I knew I had made my choice. I had returned a watch worth more than my life, and received in exchange something far more valuable. A love as dangerous and beautiful as the man who offered it, the poor maid and the Mafia boss. An impossible pairing that somehow, against all odds, had become necessary, essential, complete.